After this woman got married, not only did she not get any affection from her husband, but there was even a family photo of her husband and his ex-wife hanging on the wall of their home. Lan Anai is a single mother. She married Jiho, who has 2 daughters, and took his son. After the wedding, in order to appear happy in front of her mother, Lan Anai bought some expensive ingredients at the supermarket for her mother, and told her mother that Jiho had told her to do so before going out. Lan Anai didn't know that as soon as she swiped her card at the counter, her husband received a notification of the purchase. Jiho's expression at this time was slightly displeased. After returning home, he hurriedly opened the refrigerator to check, but found that there was no increase in food in the house. So Jiho quietly took out his wife's account book and checked it, and only then discovered that his wife had actually used his money to subsidize her mother-in-law, and her mother knew that her daughter's remarried family was having a hard time. Unfortunately, the family urgently needed 5 million in cash to repay the loan, so her mother had no choice but to ask her daughter for a few days. Lan Anai was embarrassed to refuse, so she went to the counter to withdraw cash using her husband's card, but found that her husband's card had already had its password changed. In the end, she could only look at her mother with embarrassment, and make up an excuse that she had accidentally forgotten the password. After the children had finished eating, Lan Anai carefully asked her husband for the password to his bank card, lying that she needed cash to buy some kitchen supplies. Unexpectedly, her husband refused her request without saying a word. Lan Anai saw this and did not dare to say anything more, but her actions had already caused resentment in her husband's heart. Lan Anai's humility made her son feel neglected in the family. When the family went out to eat for a holiday, Lan Anai was too busy trying to please her husband to pay attention to her son. She kept giving her husband's 2 daughters meat on their spoons. Her husband then scolded her son for not paying attention to his food. Lan Anai hurriedly took away the toy her son was holding after hearing this. Not only that, but even when they were eating at home, her 2 daughters constantly complained about the food Lan Anai made, saying it was hard to eat. This greatly affected the physical development of the 2 sisters. Even though Lan Anai always puts the food in front of her 2 daughters, she still can't get her husband to smile. When her eldest daughter complains unreasonably, the kind Lan Anai can only pretend to smile and nod in agreement. However, at this time, her aunt, who had been out, also returned home. When the daughters saw this, they hurriedly and happily went up to ask for gifts. Unsurprisingly, their aunt's gifts were also only for the 2 daughters, and Lan Anai's son could only sit there and watch with envy. After the children fell asleep, Jiho went straight to his wife and questioned her about the recent spending that she had not reported to him. Lan Anai was very surprised that her husband knew about it. Jiho then said that he had set up text message alerts. Although he did not mean to spy on Lan Anai, he did not want to be taken lightly just because he was making money from his business. The next day, Lan Anai's father was selling scrap metal. Unexpectedly, on his way home, he found his son-in-law taking his 2 daughters out for a big meal. When the old father saw this, his heart was not at ease. He understood that his grandson had not been approved by his son-in-law at this time, so he went to the school to pick up his grandson after school, and then took him to a restaurant for a barbecue, and bought him a toy. When Lan Anai learned about this, she hurried out, because she had fallen out with her father over her insistence on getting remarried. Lan Anai watched her father's aging back gradually disappear, and her eyes instantly filled with tears of self-reproach. Meanwhile, her son and younger sister were fighting over the toy. When her sister saw this, she immediately told her brother to kneel down and apologize. When Lan Anai returned home, she heard her eldest daughter tell her off. After the eldest daughter took her younger sister to the bedroom, Lan Anai directly taught her son to let his younger sister play with the toys first, but she didn't know that those were the toys that her grandfather had just bought him with great difficulty. The next day was her father-in-law's birthday. After the family was done with their errands, they all sat at the table with blank expressions, because Lan Anai's husband was still not there. When the son-in-law arrived, the mother-in-law hurriedly came forward to greet him with a bow, but her son-in-law looked disgusted and pulled away his hand, and dropped the gift in his hand, and after a few casual greetings, he turned and left directly. Even so, the mother-in-law still insisted on seeing her son-in-law downstairs, but her father was very dissatisfied with her mother's behavior, and accused her of not being subservient to her son-in-law. After that, he angrily got up and left the table. Lan Anai also shed tears of self-reproach. At this time, her mother was also very aggrieved. She felt that she had done nothing wrong for her daughter. The next day, the mother-in-law went to a class reunion. Listening to her old classmates mock her daughter's miserable second marriage, the mother-in-law's heart was filled with anger. At a critical moment, she saw her son-in-law and daughter outside the door, so she forcibly pulled her son-in-law in, without any concealment. She praised her son-in-law's financial resources. Jiho suddenly understood the mother-in-law's intentions. He directly said that today's expenses would all be paid by him. Seeing this, the mother-in-law directly told the waiter to serve more good ingredients, and she forcibly made her son-in-law sit down and have a drink with everyone, but he ended up spilling the food all over his son-in-law. This made Jiho feel very annoyed when he got home. Lan Anai could only serve her mother-in-law with caution. When her mother-in-law got home, She told her family about her experience today, but her father was very worried about his daughter after hearing about it. Her mother-in-law is too respectful, and her son-in-law will have a hard time. In the end, it is their daughter who will suffer. But despite her husband's persuasion, her mother-in-law still didn't think it was a problem. On the other side, Lananai's son and sister started fighting over a toy again. The two children had a fight over it. The eldest daughter heard it and directly hit her younger brother. And Lananai in the kitchen heard her sons crying but didn't dare to go out. It wasn't until her aunt, who had been awakened, came out that the children stopped. Facing her aunt's accusations, Lananai didn't dare to defend her son. She could only make her son suffer to calm the anger of the whole family. Afterwards, Tom, who was worried about his mother, went to the kitchen to visit her. He happened to catch her crying alone. When the old father came to visit his grandson the next day, he learned from Tom that his daughter was not doing well. After hearing this, the father couldn't help but call his son-in-law. He hoped that his son-in-law would take care of his daughter and grandson more. However, when Jiho returned home, he immediately warned Lananai not to spread family matters outside. If she has any grievances, she can tell him. He didn't want outsiders to interfere in his family affairs. In order to verify whether his daughter is happy at home, the three people from her family prepared to take gifts to her house to see for themselves. After Lananai learned the news, she quickly took down the photo of her husband and ex-wife. After an awkward chat, the son-in-law and father-in-law got up and went to the bedroom. While wandering around, the father-in-law accidentally discovered this photo hidden by his daughter. After looking at the terrified expression on his grandson's face, the father's heart probably understood that a woman's life is not as glamorous as it seems. After returning home, the father looked at the refrigerator full of food and suddenly felt a sense of guilt. At this time, his wife returned home with the tonic she bought for her son. When she learned that her daughter had paid for it again, the father immediately became furious and threw all the food in the fridge away. That day, Lananai specially dressed up nicely, hoping to have sex with her husband tonight. Unexpectedly, her husband fled the room with the excuse of working overtime. This made Lananai feel particularly disappointed. Her husband's absence for the whole night made her feel suspicious. However, the next day, Lananai felt that she had misunderstood her husband, because Jiho decided to bring her to the company's couples party for the first time, which showed that her husband still recognized her in his heart. Unexpectedly, the crowd at the scene cast surprised glances at her. Lananai saw this and timidly left, because she felt that she was fundamentally out of place with everything here. Finally, someone took the initiative to talk to her, but the other party questioned whether she was Jiho's wife, and why she looked different from the last time she saw her. This remark immediately made Lananai's mood plummet. It turned out that her husband still had not completely disclosed his identity to everyone. Just as Lananai was in distress, she suddenly noticed someone accidentally fall into the pool. Lananai, anxious to save someone, jumped in, but forgot that she couldn't swim. With Lananai shouting for help, the two were quickly rescued. However, when she got home, not only did she not receive any attention from her husband, but he blamed her for embarrassing him at the banquet. Jiho even blamed his wife for not being able to close the deal. This made Lananai feel deeply guilty once again. However, when Jiho went to the hospital to visit the person who had fallen into the water, unexpectedly, the partner expressed his gratitude to him with excitement and said that he could sign the contract with him immediately, which made Jiho feel very happy. So he went to the flower shop and bought a bouquet of flowers and gave them to his wife directly when he got home. Lananai's heart revealed an unshakable joy. At this time, Jiho opened the closet and looked at the well-organized clothes and the clean and tidy bedroom, and then thought about the mess when he was living with his ex-wife before. Jiho felt guilty and directly hugged Lananai. The next day, he took the children to the supermarket to buy toys. His son looked at the more expensive ones on the top shelf and after some thought, he picked up the cheapest little toy. Lananai saw this and picked up a big one and asked her son why he didn't want it. Unexpectedly, her son said it was because it wasn't his mother's money. Her son's good behavior made Lananai feel heartbroken. Later, when Lananai was about to send the children to school, her son expressed his desire to go to his sister's kindergarten. Lananai could only lie and say that there were no vacancies for the time being. The helpless son could only watch his sister leave on the school bus with envy. The next day, her mother called Lananai and told her that the daughter of the neighbor's family had finally broken up with her husband because he had not cut off contact with his ex-wife. So her mother suggested that they quickly register the grandson's household registration under her son-in-law's family. This way, they could keep her son-in-law firmly tied to the family, and Tom will have to go to school when he grows up. Finally, after Lananai's careful consideration, she finally gathered the courage to raise the issue of her son's household registration with her husband that night. Jiho did not evade the issue and agreed directly and cheerfully. Although this was a trivial matter, Lananai suddenly felt a burst of happiness in her heart. However, the next day when Jiho consulted a lawyer about the matter, unexpectedly the lawyer said that if the son was registered, then he would have the same property distribution rights as his two daughters. Jiho was deeply perplexed after hearing this. In order to please her husband and his daughter, Lananai personally prepared meals and cakes at home for her daughter. In order